Hello, and welcome to part 1 of a multi-part video where I'll be reading and reviewing the complete works of Fujimoto Tatsuki so far, the author of Chainsaw Man, Fire Punch, and a myriad of other one-shots between 2014 and 2020. Because most of these one-shots took place during the run of Fire Punch, we'll be starting with that series, moving on to the one-shots, then covering Chainsaw Man last. These videos will contain full spoilers for their respective stories, so if you haven't read these manga already, I strongly encourage you to do so before watching. None of them are very long. I'd also like to warn you this story contains explicit violence and sexual violence, this one in particular. With all that said, let's get into the video. Thank you for watching. Hundreds of years from now, the Earth is in an ice age. The few people left are tied together by pockets of obligation, be it religion, community, or survival. With no deep roots to tie them down, these pockets come and go, but they do not die out. Our main character begins as a young man in one such village. When fate burns it down, he refuses to die. And still on fire, he rises into a long walk that leads him to the end of humanity. This is Fire Punch by Tatsuki Fujimoto. Good evening, and thank you for watching Manga Monday, the bi-weekly show where we read, review, and recommend interesting or very good manga. I'm your host, twitch.tv/V_VLOGSSV and welcome to the show. Again. And this week we're beginning our omnibus review series on Fujimoto Tatsuki, the author of Fire Punch, Chainsaw Man, and a bunch of one-shots. Like I said a second ago, we're going to cover everything he's written in full, starting with Fire Punch right now. This one I first picked up a while back and skimmed at the bookstore a few years ago. Didn't think much of it. All the snowy backgrounds just kind of seemed lazy to me at first. I didn't really get it at a glance. But years later, people are still talking about this series, and I read Chainsaw Man this last year, and I loved that, so I wanted to pick this up again. And I thought, after reading it, let's just cover everything. So here we go. I like this one a lot. It feels unrestrained in the way that sort of Chainsaw Man is tied down with suits. This one is just fucking all over the place. Chapter 0. This begins with our main character Agni, a black-haired boy who's having his more fragile sister cut off his arm, Luna, to feed the people of his village. This village isn't very large. Most of the people here are old and can't hunt for food, so as the harsh cold creeps in more and more and local animals grow scarce, the village has resorted to cannibalism. Some have chose to die instead of eat human meat, but the one thing they instill in Agni early on is that he must live no matter the cost. That's a huge theme. Agni follows his elders' teachings and lives a simple life for the people of his village. He does what he has to do because he loves them and his sister Luna. They're the only younger people in the village, and they've talked about having children because of their situation. One day while out hunting for deer, Agni sees a plane fly by and chases it down. Soldiers from a kingdom called Behemdord came here to gather supplies after a battle nearby. Agni rushes up to the leader, a blonde, suave, clean-cut man named Doma. Agni says, "We have no supplies. Please leave." Doma seems pretty good-spirited at first, explaining that his city is amassing an army to defeat this ice witch who cursed this cold earth, and that he would take Agni on as a citizen if he wanted to. A rare young man in this world who could help them out with their goal of warming the earth. Suddenly, one of the soldiers runs up to the leader Doma and reports that human flesh has been found in every home. Doma's face darkens, turning towards Agni, and he says, "We're leaving. Withdraw. These people aren't human." As he walks away, he stops, and then says, "Agni, are there any gifted in your village?" Agni says, "No." Doma explains that he is gifted, and the gift he's received, he has to use his power for the king. He raises one hand towards Agni's face and says, "My flame will never be extinguished until death." And it's assumed from the panel jump that he burned down Agni's village. Agni's a crawling black corpse among the rubble of his burnt home and all the homes in the surrounding village. It's one black panel, and to the next, he's burning, regenerating, crawling, burning, dying, coming back to life. He crawls through the ashen snow to find his sister burning like him, and they look into each other's sunken skulls, and he remembers their life and pictures their future, what could have been. They touch fists, reaching out towards each other, and she says, "Live." and he focuses on that. For the first year, he can only cry in pain. After 3 years, he can begin to walk, dripping blood and biting his tongue. After 5 years, he can move freely, but the flames make it hard to breathe, so he can't go very far. Slowly, he can control the flame. With his first real full breath, he clenches his fists, and he sets out to get revenge. Begins walking. We cut to a cargo truck driving along the snow, full of passengers in the back. The truck slows down and the driver gets out to relieve himself outside. He decides to fuck with the passengers in the back. Using a blessing, he creates iron in his hand to form a cup, and makes one passenger drink his piss, before pulling more out to kill some elderly and uncooperative they don't need to feed along the way and just leave them here in the snow dead. The last person in the lineup they were planning on leaving, a young, pretty feminine boy named San, prays to God, and in the distant snow, Agni walks out into view, just on fire, covered in flames. The soldiers stop shooting people they had in the lineup, and as they turn around, they're all burned to death, and Agni's standing there looking at his fist. And that's the end of the prologue. I'm sure that's a lot to take in. Agni's now on a journey through the wastes to get revenge on Doma, the clean-cut man who 8 years ago set him on fire and burned his village down. We meet San, who will become his first follower, the boy in the lineup. At this point, I'm really enjoying the visual world building. The snow is beautiful. Some of the more dense scenes with a lot of characters are really impressive for a fairly new author. There's plenty of detail, but it's also really loose, and it's like a really visually pleasing just conglomerate of things going on. I don't know, it's dense, but it looks good. And there's like snowstorms covering stuff sometimes, there's like hazy shadows of people in the background, but everything flows together really nicely. With that really like harsh opening, I was hooked immediately with him cutting off his arm in the snow with an axe. That's super effective. And from there, it was a pretty quick ride for all those events to happen, and I'm hooked in, so let's get into the story. In the next chapter, we have some room to breathe following that opening one-shot, Chapter 0, and we see that Agni's parents were taken away when he and Luna were young to be used as fuel, and for a while, he and Luna were slaves to a small encampment being ripped apart daily to be used as fuel too. Agni killed his captors when they attempted to rape Luna, his sister, and we cut back to him killing the slave drivers in present day at the end of Chapter 0, remembering that, I guess, he remembered, oh yeah, I killed those guys back then for similar reasons, and here I am doing it again today. The boy he rescued coincidentally, the last in the lineup to be shot, was San. San follows him down the road, just kind of trailing him on his long walk from here on. You see onlookers watching from a mountain with binoculars, kind of in awe at this walking fireball man. While they rest, some bandits approach to kill them. Maybe those are the people on the mountain watching them, maybe those are new people that have appeared. But with the endless pain, Agni can never really sleep, and just by touching the bandits as they approach, they're all set ablaze and gone. The last bandit who didn't get caught in the flames takes San hostage, but Sean shocks them, revealing that he has a lightning blessing. And we get San's backstory. San was part of a small village that came to be infected with a plague. It was a pretty friendly, nice place, and they didn't want him to contract the illness, so the villagers and his brother sent San out on his own with a purpose. He was meant to bring warmth to the world. They told him, go and bring some amount of brightness to this terrible place. Appropriate for his name, which means sun. This seems to have made San pretty religious, and having met a man who's actually walking on fire, he follows him. This is a pretty clear answer to his journey. Just a flaming ball of warmth. The next day, San and Agni begin walking again, until a man drives up on a snowmobile and chops Agni's head off. A bunch of other drivers swoop in and they light up Agni's head with gunfire to slow his regeneration powers, then wrap it in fireproof cloth really quick. Before he's wrapped up though, he sees the leader of the snowmobile people looks like his sister. Interesting. It cuts to a little while later and we're now in the city, Behemdorg, that was mentioned earlier by Doma in the first chapter. It's full of skyscrapers, chapels, high-rise indoor gardens, and food halls. It's an entire giant city hidden in the snow. It's very like eco-punk brutalism. It's cool. We cut to some soldiers' barracks and we see San alone with a black-haired girl named Minetto. She's 13, San is revealed to be 8. She introduces herself, and she seems to be more educated than San is, who's kind of just like a ignorant young village boy. She seems kind of smart. She says she's worried they'll become slaves since they're here. Suddenly, a soldier enters with 2 huskies and introduces himself. At first, he asks them about their problems, hugs Nanetto as she cries, acts like their friend. Then he makes them undress. He says he's gonna make them and the huskies have sex. San doesn't understand what this means, or what sex is, but he takes off his clothes. Nanetto's just in horror, but seeing San as a male, the soldier stops, and San is able to quickly shock him and escape with Nanetto. They run out and down the hall, but seconds later he falls down. Looking down, his legs have been chopped clean off. He looks down at the pools of blood at his feet, and he's picked up by a large man. His wounds are closed by this man's blessing, and he's told he'll be servicing Behem Dorugo for the rest of his life. He'll be tied up, and as long as he's awake, he'll be emitting electricity constantly, because this is the purpose God has given him. This is the purpose the king has given him. San passes out. At this point, by the way, the city's name is now Behem Dorugo, slightly longer than we said it was earlier, Behem Dorg. You may have noticed that it keeps changing its name. That's what it does in the translation. I'm not sure why that is. It was a short name before. That's just how it's written. Anyways, the city's been clearly built on top of the ruins of another city, long after the Ice Age killed its original inhabitants. So there are parts of the city that have just been abandoned and crumbled, and parts on top of that were turned into this new architecture. And there are a lot of people here. It seems like there are probably thousands, all seemingly under the same religion and military rule. It's very cool. It's very cyberpunk in its own way. After San passes out, we hear more conversation between the soldiers. We see Agni's head. It's out on the ground, and he's being shot at relentlessly by soldiers with guns to keep him stupid and placated, so he can't regenerate, shooting him in the brain. Suddenly, he gains consciousness and spits a bullet back from the inside of his cheek, and sets the soldier on fire. The fire, as Doma mentioned in the first chapter, never goes out until they die. He rises and heals himself. He comes face to face with Doma, who happens to be nearby, the man who killed his sister. Doma now has long hair and a beard. It's been 5 years at least. He's sort of stunned. He's like, "How are you still alive, my boy? The flames are meant to burn forever." Before long, Doma starts begging for forgiveness, and he realizes the gravity of the situation. He says, "Anything but death." Agni raises his fist. He's about to slam it into Doma, and we get a hard cut. Now we're looking at on a home movie of a girl named Togeda, who, while filming herself, gives us a bit of an exposition dump. She sets the camera down and walks away from the TV to start filming herself. She says, "Our era lasted until there was a cultural revolution in the 2300s, and a lot of shit went down. There were films being made between the 1990s and 2200 that she loved, and she's been watching them for hundreds of years to keep herself sane, while she lived an unending life due to her blessing. A regenerative blessing, sort of like Agni's. One day, someone came and stole all of her movies, and burned her home down. She was miserable. All she could do was exist and jerk off, until she heard about the walking man on fire, who inspired her to make a movie. This diary is the beginning of her movie, centering on him as the main character, and then she leaves the room to set off and find him." I love this whole video diary bit. I've never seen anything like this in a manga, and it's so endearing and cool, and it's such a great way to introduce a character. And obviously it's been inspired by film as much as Togeda is as a character, as we'll see here later on. By the way, Agni lost to Doma. After begging for his life, he turned around and fire blasted Agni's body apart instantly, turning him into just a head again. So now Togeda, the girl, our film director, who we just met, sets off to rescue Agni from a transport train where he's being transported by just the head. They're gonna go dump him in the ocean so he can't hurt anyone, and she begins to film all of it, which is making me laugh the entire time because the villains are like squaring up with their monologues in the old boy hallway scene on this train, and their god powers and super skeletons and blessings, and Togeda's like, "Nice pose, this will look great in my movie," which makes them look so stupid. They're just like, what are you talking about? And she absolutely just rocks their shit, and then she realizes that this is essentially all unusable shaky cam footage because she's been swinging the camera around kicking people, which is hilarious, and I love Togeda. One of the enemies has a regen blessing, so Togeda like kicks their head off a moving train like a soccer ball, and she's like, yes, that'll make a great shot in my movie. Moving on, she happens to rescue Nanetto, who is also being transported, the girl we met a minute ago, San's friend, who was going to be raped by huskies. Nanetto is hereby dubbed Camera Girl by Togeda, and will be filming Fire Punch the movie, so she gets handed the camera. The two then go to the back of the train, having made it through all these people that Togeda's fought. I guess this was obvious, but she's a really badass fighter because she's lived for like 300 years and has watched a lot of Kung Fu movies a million times. So they make it to the back of the train, and they're like, okay, how are we gonna stop this train? And Togeda like puts her back to the back of the train and is like, I'm gonna stop the train just like that scene in Spider-Man 2 with my heels down. And then they just cut to them being off the train, so it's like, did she do that? I'm assuming not. That would be insane, but they don't bother to explain. Anyways, they're off the train, they have Agni's head. Anyways, Nanetto and Togeda outside now with this package containing Agni's head. They set C4 and go hide behind a rock, then blow it open, and Agni rises from the smoke in front of them for the first time. At the same time, the girl whose head was kicked off the train appears from the distance. She looks like Agni's sister again, and she says, "Stop, what are you doing? Stop walking. Don't come near. You're gonna burn down my country if you keep walking towards it like that." Which just makes sense for them to fear. I mean, Doma's flame never extinguishes, so if he walks into a dense city like that, he's probably gonna set the whole city on fire. Agni doesn't really know what's going on. He had his head chopped off and he hasn't been really sentient since then, so he just is like, "Who are you? You look like my sister." And Judah is like, "If you want to see your sister again, then die." She's like, "Don't fuck with my city, I don't care what you have to say." And Togeda, who has been now caught up on the plot from these two talking, is just absolutely blushing with excitement. She's so hyped on this story, it's gonna make such a good movie. The man's sister and village were burned down, now he's out for revenge, and he has someone who looks like his sister as his new enemy. But this girl is stopping Togeda from making a movie, so she runs up and chops Judah's head off and punts her freaking head into the ocean. And then Agni's like, "No, my sister's head!" And he chases the head into the ocean, but Togeda's like, "No, no, no," and she is running the head down deeper into the ocean. And it's this great double spread. There's great pages of them like fighting for this head in the ocean. I can't even do it justice. Check out these like snow, water, fire, and ice shots all working together. It's beautiful. So the chase ends with Togeda holding Judah's head, Agni opposite of her, and she says, "I won't chuck this head into the ocean or force you to set it on fire trying to rescue it if you play an actor in my movie on your journey for revenge." And Agni agrees and says, "Okay, whatever, just let her go. You don't need to senselessly kill this person." Okay, another break real quick. I've got to stop for a second and say this plot is a lot of fun so far. I love Togeda. The idea of a self-insert director to the plot of her story in her movie, which is also the plot of this manga, is nuts. It works, and some of the art is just unreal. I can't help but be reminded of JoJo, where the author is like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna do whatever I want. Throw some bizarre shit in there visually, storytelling wise, I'll just skip parts of the plot, you figure it out, I can draw, we'll make it work." Anyways, Agni's now being helped by Togeda, the unkillable film director, on his quest for revenge. Now we cut back to the city of Behemdorg, where people are being used as fuel. San, the boy with the blessing of electricity, is being hooked up to a table where he'll be kept alive just barely, and drained of power until he dies. Rows and rows of people on the same tables begin to console San, those being drained of water, fire, and iron, that, as painful as this is, eventually he will die, and be safe. But San says he won't die. Agni is going to rescue him, and everyone here because San believes Agni is God. Agni is now back at Togeda's camp after their agreement. She's teaching him how to fight, she's making him fireproof clothes, and teaching him how to speak English. While he's there, Togeda runs into Behemdorg alone to make sure her movie goes smoothly and set everything up for this final battle. She finds that Agni's supposed enemy, Doma, who burned down his village and set him on fire, at this point has become an old, mentally disabled bearded man. This won't do as a final boss, so she sets out to find somebody more dangerous. So she finds and corners Judah, one of the leaders of the city, the girl who looks like his sister. And Tokuda threatens her with bombs throughout the city. She holds out her remote and blows one up as a threat. And this is another one of my favorite panels with her. You can see just like the glass shattering all over her face as she looks at them dead ass, after setting all these traps up to make sure everything goes smoothly. So she makes Judah take her underground, where they keep all the criminals with dangerous blessings, here as the prison in the city. And Tokuda surprisingly already knows her way around, because she once lived here a long time ago. She opens a secret passage full of dangerous weapons and power armor. She explains to Judah that the city wasn't always religious like this. Their king and this ice queen are both made up as part of their long-standing religion. Ways to explain global warming and keep the citizens in line with what little is left of humanity. The city's bureaucracy isn't even waist deep. People like Judah are about as high as it goes, and they're just soldiers. Meaning they're living in a big house of cards. And Tokuda is completely willing to knock it over for the sake of her movie. She goes back to camp after having talked to Judah and sets out with Agni to get revenge. He puts on his fireproof suit she made for him. It's a weird combination of like a suit and tie suit and also just like a hoodie. We see the villains are lining up at a clearing near the edge of the inner city with their power armor on. Agni and some people from Tokuda's camp start storming in through the outskirts, but as they rush through, Agni has to stop. He can't walk through the slaves and fuel tables. He sees them and starts to hallucinate, and his mind starts to change. He decides that while he's an actor for revenge for Tokuda now, his heart is saying he wants to save these people, and San, who he abandoned early on. It's not really talked about, and this isn't on the script, but Agni is kind of not all there. He's so focused on just walking with this fire that's burning up his mind, he doesn't have a lot of say of his own. So we get these little bursts of him having a personality, where most of the time he's just like at the mercy of whoever tells him what to do because he's so simple-minded from this fire. And this is one of those situations where he's got to like stop and bring himself together and be like, I have to save these people. I can't just be your actor right now. I know this is important to you, but I do want to free these slaves. So they do save them. The few soldiers they have kind of round up and grab people off the fuel tables, grab the prisoners, and Agni walks out with a large crowd of rescued people behind him to confront these comical supervillain enemies in power armor. And Judah's there. You think she'd be horrified that all these people are freed, but she's just kind of relieved. She's got a regen blessing, so like Tokuda, she's lived for a really long time with her blessing, 130 years. And they say as you get older, you start to disassociate. And they say that around 100 years is a regen blessing. When humans start ending their lives naturally, these kind of people start wishing for death. And she knows about this city, and about everything, thanks to Tokuda. And she's ready for it to just end. The fight begins, and Agni immediately gets knocked into a skyscraper by one of these supervillains. The skyscraper sets ablaze, huge parts of the city sets on fire. The fight is going okay. I mean, Agni is beating the supervillains, but the city's burning. And the subtext around this fight is, like I mentioned earlier, the government is only a small group of people and soldiers, and Agni is overcoming their forces alone. They start threatening to kill the slaves he brought out, and Agni just says, okay, you're going to kill them anyways. You're going to kill everyone anyways. This is over. Some of the soldiers and the people that he rescued begin getting on their knees and praying for Agni, this burning man, to rescue them as both Satan and God. While this is happening, and Judah's watching this, we get her backstory. She was chosen long ago at a young age to be a religious leader in the city, who with her powers can supposedly hear God's will, and she's asked to continue to say she can hear God's will and fake it for the people and make them believe in this power. This was hinted at earlier, as she's always been extra religious, and she's blessing new recruits on the train. Some of the soldiers would say things like, you don't have to put on a show, Judah, it's just us here. I guess because the soldiers are part of the inner circle. I should clarify here that as far as I can tell, until now it's never really been explicitly stated there's no king in this city, but now more than ever it's really obviously a lie. There's no real, king or ice switch or any of this. And the city's gone now, it's on fire. So everyone kind of drops the act and begins to escape in stolen cargo vehicles. Agni's won the battle. We get sort of a Mad Max chase as we have people in vehicles with prisoners and people with vehicles with soldiers and weapons, chasing each other through the snow out of the city. It turns out, Agni has a religious following of people that he saved on his first walk, and people that saw him and saw what he's been doing until now start coming to save him, so we have more vehicles approaching on Agni's side trying to stop the soldiers too, and this chase just grows bigger and bigger. We've got a dude with underwear on his head and a baseball bat who can read minds. We've got a girl who's in a bikini flying around in a spear, kind of like the OG Gynex girl on a sword. We have a nude dude in tighty whities with a Dark Souls helmet who can make swords out of thin air with his iron blessing, and he is also very kick-ass. You get all these fun characters to come and work with Agni. After a long battle, they make it home, they escape, they've got out of the city. Behemdorg is dead, Agni's the new leader. And Agni's got a whole town under him now, and they want to worship him as their leader and god, and he's done it. He's generally gotten revenge, so at this point, I would have been happy with the story ending, to be honest. I wasn't really sure where it would go from here and why we have so much left. I enjoyed the simple characters so far and the world outline. Pacing was super tight, but believe it or not, we've got a lot more to go. Fujimoto did sow 1 or 2 more seeds to come back to, so I guess not everything's wrapped up. Something I didn't mention was during the escape, Judah touched Agni and set herself on fire, but before she could die, someone chopped off her head and said, "Don't get in my way, Agni." And it was a little girl in a big winter coat who claimed to be the Ice Queen. This is sort of a footnote in the chase on the way out. The supposed fake god, the Ice Queen, who froze the earth, is standing in front of Agni on this moving vehicle. And so while everyone's back at camp, and it seems like everyone we've met so far has escaped and is living a better life, or at least has escaped the reigns of Behemdorg, we cut to a small cabin in a snowstorm far away. In a bed, we see Judah from the neck up, sleeping. As she wakes up, another person in a chair next to her, this Ice Queen person, pulls off her coat, and she looks just like Judah, and Agni's sister Luna, only with a tree growing partially out of her eye. She then gives a big world exposition dump. This is a very Naruto Shippuden Madara Obito moment. But ignoring that, try to pay attention, because this shit is wild. Judah can't move. She's now a puppet to the Ice Witch, who drags her out into the snow by these tendrils of a tree to look at the night sky with her and tell her the story of this world. Long ago, before this ice age, humans learned to use what we now call blessings, as commonly as household appliances. Anyone could shoot fire or ice, as she demonstrates now by shooting fire, and demonstrated earlier by shooting ice at Agni to block his way. The powers weren't associated with religion at all. Humans who broke the boundaries of religion and borders began to look the same as they used these powers together, mostly like Luna and Judah and the Ice Witch now. Humans, advanced as they were, abandoned the need for conflict and art and creativity. They left this earth to go colonize the stars, but in their time away, they failed to do so and died out. As the Ice Witch puts it, the beautiful stars shining down on us now are the lamps of such withered civilizations. So, she says, because we're doomed and they've failed, we don't need to feel bad about what we're about to do. We're going to warm the earth. To do this, you will need to take the life of every living creature except for me. You will be the root, you will stretch up and out, like a tree to take the life of every other planet. This will just barely begin to warm this earth. And then I alone will birth a new humanity here with what time we have left, and you will continue living, conscious or not, stretching up and out forever, never coming to an end, Judah. Judah began to tear up, frozen in place. She could just cry. The Ice Witch touches her own face where the tree is growing. She explains that she was going to be the root to warm the earth originally, but she realized before humanity's end she had one goal herself, and we would need to try again with what time we had left. She had one thing she had to do before she left this world that she couldn't help but accomplish. She had to find a vessel to take her place. You see, when humans stopped creating art, they left the final Star Wars movie unfinished. And even if it takes 1,000,000 years, she will watch the final Star Wars movie. Okay, that was a lot, and it really impacted me emotionally. The author did a great job making this feel really big, and that life as we knew it was coming to its end. And then at the end it was like, what the fuck? This reminded me a lot of JoJo again. Not just part 6 and the end of the world, but part 7 when you meet the antagonist and He's the president, but he just starts monologuing about how you can shotgun beer cans, and then it cuts away, and that's it. And he's drawn really fat for some reason, and kind of like a goblin. Anyways, we have our endgame. The Ice Witch wants to create a giant eldritch tree to stretch out into the stars and steal life from other planets and warm this Earth, and also kill all the humans on this Earth, I guess. But back at the camp, Agni is now a cult leader. He doesn't really know how to feed people or handle this pressure. Togata's chopping away at parts of his body that aren't on fire, just that side of his face, to feed the village, returning to cannibalism, which is what Agni knew originally. The fire is eaten away at his mind, and he can barely form sentences at this point, so Togata's kind of taken over as the leader. He's so long gone mentally. And it kind of makes you think, like with Judah, at a certain point people sort of start to lose their mind when they've lived this long. And like Togata has. He asks, Togata, you seem to know a lot. What happens when we die? And she calls him an idiot for thinking about that, because she doesn't have an answer, obviously. But she says, well, when people die, I think they go to a cinema. I'm sure she says this because for her it's a perfect resting place and something she's never really got to visit. And something she imagines is the perfect place to do her favorite thing forever. But it makes me wonder if she sees all the characters in this world as actors in her movie, and that this is all just part of her insane frame of mind right now. So Togata's at this camp acting as God's speaker to keep Agni's voice out there and keep everybody calm they've rescued. When Baseball Bat Dad, one of the disciples who met up with them in the Mad Max chase, follows her back to the camp and yells at Agni personally. He says, "This girl is a liar! Don't trust her!" And Agni's like, "What?" And his face is falling off and he's on fire, which is his thing now. And Baseball Bat Dad says, "It's because she's really a man. I can read minds and I know this." And that's weird because we've seen Togata nude and she's not a man. But turns out she considers herself a man, and she's been too uncomfortable emotionally to come out as trans, and she runs out, really embarrassed, and Agni runs out and chases her down. What's up? It's Future V Vlogs here. Just checking in to point at my trans flag back there and let you know. I'm going to be using she pronouns for Toga in this next part of the story because that's what the author uses, and that's what Togata asks Agni to use at the end of this portion of the story, and what she continues to use until the end of the story. I've had conversations with people that use he, and I'm just using she because I feel like that's what's most appropriate based on what's written here. But trans rights, take that as you will. I mean no offense. And they have this nice meeting in the snow. And we learn that through watching movies at a young age, Togata came to associate herself more with the male characters and came to this realization that she felt that she was a man. And Agni's like, "Hey, you're my friend, and I can't start a religion alone, and I will respect your pronouns, dude, so come back, please." And she's like, "No, fuck it, you don't get it." And he's like, "Then explain it. You can be like my older brother, it's fine." And she just gets pissed off, and eventually she's like, just call me she, call me your older sister, whatever. Don't call me guy or dude, that's weird. Let me tell you a story. And then they kind of make up as she describes the story of Star Wars to him. She goes, "In a galaxy far, far away," and fades out. When they get back to camp, they found that some people have been doing recon around the area, and they find that Doma is living with a community of children just on the outskirts of town after the rescue. And so Agni and Togata go set off alone to film more of the movie because he never really got proper revenge on Doma specifically, and he's nearby now, so Agni's gonna go decide if he's worth forgiving. This area is drawn really beautifully again, I gotta say. The hill that leads into the village is just an amazing shot. And when Fujimoto wants to do a more detailed snowy backdrop, he does a great job. So they get to Doma, and he's again begs for his life. He says, "Please, I live for the people of this village now. Don't burn me, they won't have anyone without me." So he kind of walks backwards as he's talking to Agni, and eventually he kind of gets out into an iced over lake, so he's safe because Agni can't walk in there without falling through the ice. And he starts ice fishing casually as he talks to them. I mean, he's begging for his life, but he's sort of doing it in a cool way. He's not like pleading, he's just like, just leave me alone. This is over, don't worry about it. As he's fishing and he keeps talking to Agni, he says a couple of really interesting things. The first is that people of this world are doomed because they have no education. If all of their leaders, like Agni, teaches them cannibalism, that's all they're going to know when the leaders are gone. If he teaches them religion instead of science and how the world works, they'll never question the world and never learn any better. Then Doma explains how he came to want to leave Behemdog and why people thought he was crazy for abandoning the religion that he followed. One day, on one of his raids as a high-ranking officer, like when he met Agni, he found a box of old movies and learned from the box art that these films were manufactured for entertainment hundreds of years ago. One movie had the same name as their city. It was called Behemdog, and watching it, it was the same film they were showing as a religious teaching in the city. And he realized that the main character who they worshipped as a god and hunted down demons with various blessings is actually a B-list actor from hundreds of years ago using CGI. And Doma came to realize how easy it was to manufacture religion and how he'd been tricked. And maybe this is where we're explaining why the name has been changed a couple of times, because when Agni he separated from the city and began a small village of his own when he could that would value education, or whatever. Maybe that's a weird retcon, I guess. Togeda, after hearing this, just freaks out, because this Doma is the one who stole all of her movies and burned the village down, and she hates him for it. But Agni doesn't want to take revenge, and he convinces her to walk away because this is just senseless killing. Doma has an important message that he needs to think about with education. As he takes the last few steps out of the village, he has more hallucinations, and flashes of his sister and his memories cause him to black out. A few panels later, he wakes up in a clearing of ash and flames. He looks around to discover he burned down Doma's village and killed everyone. And Togeda's just watching, stunned, just holding her mouth in the distance. Can't believe what he's done. Agni doesn't believe it either. He doesn't have anything left to live for. He's so ashamed of himself, and he's gotten his supposed revenge, and he doesn't want to be a leader of this village. And he walks out into the ice where Doma was sitting before, and he drowns himself. A few panels later, we fade into a cinema. We see Luna sitting in the middle row of the cinema. He walks up to her with popcorn, smiling as his younger self. And suddenly Togeda rushes in, pushes Agni onto the floor, spilling popcorn everywhere. And he's like, she's like, get the fuck out of here. Togeda steals his seat and sits down, looks at the screen. She says, "This is me when I was a child." And we see her with her grandfather. She says, "He influenced me to watch movies, and this is how I learned that I was a man. I wanted to save someone like the protagonist did in the theater, and I really empathized with them, these manly figures." We see Agni's face and water rushes onto the screen. We cut back to the lake. Togeda is pulling Agni's burning body above water, pulling them both to shore. We see Agni's horrified face, but when we look at Togeda, they're smiling, just thinking of their last words, something cool. "See you in hell, when we are both cats." To obscure reference, Mom? Well, maybe he could empathize with Mom, but no. Togeda saved Agni's life, so they decide on live, like his sister said once. Again, we hear live for the third time, and Agni can only scream. He picks up the corpse of Togeda and walks back all the way to the village of his disciples. As he approaches the village, he looks up at a giant tree where the village once was, stretching to the sky, and all of its roots spreading along hundreds of corpses. All of his people are dead. Behind Agni, watching the tree rise, is the Ice Witch, who says, "That tree is Judah. She can use all the blessings, and she can erase your regeneration and your flames. Now let me see your end, Agni." And she starts monologuing about empathizing with movie villains and points a finger, and a tree branch pierces Agni, almost killing him, then slams him against the main trunk of the tree, and Agni suddenly starts hearing voices. Who asked for death? It says, "I created Doma. I burned down your village. I killed your sister, and I want death. But I cannot die alone. I'm at the top of this tree, so come and kill me." At this point, Agni's feeling pretty directionless and upset, like he was when he burned down the village and wanted to die. So having someone so clearly outline an objective for him while he's alive just lets him go nuts. The ice witch continues to slam him against the tree, but he pounds his fists into it like hooks and climbs all the way up. When he reaches the summit and finds Judah, he beats her to a pulp endlessly, hallucinating a miracle, that she'll rise and hug him and be his sister. He keeps punching and keeps imagining until his fists are bloodied and the tree is on fire. Eventually, the ice witch is in awe. She's like, whoa, what's going on? And the tree just explodes. And we cut to black. Sometime later, following this giant tree explosion and the death of everyone that we know, there's Agni and a nude Judah washing up on a beach. Okay, I want to take another break here to say, when I was reading this originally, I wish the story would have ended right here, or would have skipped to chapter 82, because as far as we know at this point, all of our important characters are dead, everything is resolved, and I like Tokuda's ending. We established that Agni is cursed with the gift to live until the end, and humanity is doomed. But no, we keep going. So, Agni and Judah rise, nude on the beach, and begin to wander through the snow. Agni is no longer on fire, and his right arm is gone, just like the Ice Witch promised, just a nub above the elbow where he was punching. Judah is dancing in the snow. She seems to have lost her memories, and is just enjoying the weather, and this emotion, and this feeling of the cold ice. She asks Agni who she is, and he thinks about it, and says, "You're Luna, and I'm your big brother." A really, maybe horrible lie, but something that Agni wants, and he lost everything else, so why not? They hug and feel each other's warmth in the snow, and they walk and walk until they reach a farmhouse or a factory where they steal clothes. Or rather, Luna tries on a bunch of outfits and mind breaks Agni because she is so cute and he's just losing his mind at what's going on and doesn't understand. And he begins to cry and covers his face. And she pulls his hands away to ask him what's wrong. And Agni makes this fucking mean face. Which, what does this express? Is this like deviance, uncertainty, and fear? Manga readers have been memeing this face in the communities of whatever manga for so long, I don't even know anymore. I've seen it and it means nothing to me, but if I had to guess now, it's like just deviancy, he's just horny, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of emotions here, there's a lot to unpack here, but it's just funny to me at this point. I can't take it seriously anymore. So the people who live at this barn they're stealing clothes from come back, a group of girls, one of which is Doma's daughter. They're an offshoot of Doma's village that Agni burned down before the tree exploded, and he tells them that he and Luna were part of Doma's village too, because they can't say otherwise. They escaped from some marauders, and that's how they got here. They're like, "Hey, you pervert not wearing clothes in our house, get out." And conveniently, marauders are outside. They said they were escaping from. Agni approaches them nude and fights them off, daring them to shoot him as he powers through their bullets and takes them out, which is a dumbass move because he can't heal anymore. Of course. One panel later, he's being treated in bed covered in bullet wounds, of course. But they believe he's a good guy. He did save them and took a lot of wounds for them. So, to establish something real quick, in the time Agni was away, Fire Punch Man became sort of a mythic figure. The god and Satan that he was prayed to as during the first big rescue back in Behenburg became reality. I mean, he came in, he saved a bunch of people, he set the buildings on fire, and he disappeared. He came back to this small village briefly, but everyone that he came back with died for the most part, so he's just... this event is around him. So once he recovers from his bullet wounds, because he has a little bit of healing power left in him, I guess he could, survive that somehow, but it took a lot out of him. Doma's daughter asks him, "Brother, will you please kill the Fire Punch?" That's what he goes by the way. He decided to go by brother because he didn't want to use his name Agni and be associated with the Fire Punch. Agni, or brother, takes this to mean kill himself, because he knows he's the Fire Punch. But his healing powers are coming back, and while he's tried to kill himself, he survives. He's just hurting himself. And Luna catches him on a couple of occasions and asks him to stop, because he's all she has. He's her brother, as far as she knows. And so he chooses to live for her. And then we have a 10-year time skip. So we're living in a post-Fire Punch world, with Agni as brother now in this timeline, and it seems like Agni should have everything he wants. I mean, the Fire Punch in him is gone. He does have those memories of all the people he killed, but he should just keep that part of himself inside. He has a family now, he has a sister again. It's technically legal to bang her now. The world is even warming up slightly because of the giant Lovecraft tree death that he exploded. The future is bright. But Agni's inner turmoil remains. Doma's daughter Tena has a child. She was pregnant when they first met. And Tena is still coming to Agni in private and being like, hey, kill the fire punch. You're strong. Go do it. At this point, what are we supposed to think? Does she know Agni's the fire punch and wants him to kill himself? Because she likes him. Why would she want him to kill himself? Or does Tena want him to go find the fire punch and kill him? Because the fire punch hasn't done anything wrong in like 10 years. It doesn't seem like that's been affecting them at all. Maybe Agni's been out and committing arson in private? I don't know. It's been 10 years, lady. Fire punch has not affected your life. Leave Agni alone. Stop asking him to go kill some man. He's supposed to be your brother now. So we cut back to the village some distance away that was turned into a tree by Judah a while back. And we find that San and some others that were not killed by the giant tree are still alive. San is probably about 18 or 19 now, and he's founded the Fire Punch religion with this group of people. And he leads this religion with Neto and the Ice Witch, and they're puppeting him as this master of the small area. I don't really know why the Ice Witch is doing this, because she didn't get to consume the entire earth. I guess the one tree was enough. It's kind of warm now. But San isn't joking around. He actually believes in this religion and ends up killing the Ice Witch to take over. He says, Naneto, we're gonna storm that house that we see on the outskirts, take Judah back, make her a giant tree again, just leave Agni alone. He's not part of this religion anymore. He doesn't represent what the Fire Punch does. He's not a fireman anymore. They also mention there's a small army of Revengers who didn't like Agni burning down their thousands of people in the city, which is fair. And Judah killing hundreds as a cult leader in the city, fair again. And turning them into a giant tree, also fair. So they're all going to go storm the farmhouse and take Judah out of there and turn her into a tree, but this time don't let her kill people. I don't know how they're going to do that, but that's what they're doing. And Neto sets out early and goes to warn Agni because she's like, hey dude, remember me, you're my friend, you gotta abandon this family, we're gonna come and kill all of you and take Judah away, so just leave her, and just leave us. Agni is torn because he really wants to save his quote-unquote sister. I mean, real or not, they've been living together for 10 years, so they're a family now. So he goes to tell her, and she doesn't understand. She's like, why can't we just be together? This is unfair. And they have passionate sex all night. The next morning, they're in bed, and the family's like, hey guys, what the fuck are you doing in there? And then Naneto comes back, and she's like, hey guys, what the fuck? You were supposed to leave last night, Agni. And the Revengers storm the house. Agni fights them off with his bare fists. And Tena is like, stop killing. You said you'd kill the Fire Punch. And then it seems like at this point that she did know he was the Fire Punch, and she just wanted him to kill this part of himself that was having trouble coming to terms with his past. That seems to be the implication here. I don't know why she told him this for 10 years and kept bringing it up though. Whatever. Tena's daughter inherited Doma's fire and blasts Agni to make him not kill the people that are invading. And whoops, now he's on fire again, and Agni's the Fire Punch again, and he storms off towards the San City to go fucking kill everyone again. I don't mean to sound disinterested and half-assy at this point, but I really don't like how this is being handled, this part of the story. But I do like the finale that follows this a good bit, so I'm going to take it more seriously here real quick because this part's really cool and good. I'm just exhausted at this point. I think the ending was done this way to give San a satisfying arc because he deserved it and he was one of the people in the very first chapter. So let's just cover what San has gone through so far and what this ending means to him. San grew up loved by his religious village and family, which gave him hope that when he was sent out into the harsh world with a given purpose, he would be able to bring warmth to others. His chance meeting with a man who's literally on fire gave him a very easy solution to his problem. Later in the story, Doma says that when people aren't educated, they'll believe what they know so far. And when San is tied down to be tortured to death, he's ignorant, and he still has faith. He chooses to believe that his first savior, Agni, would rescue him and prays to him as God, and has the other people in this table room pray to him too. So when Agni does come save his life with hundreds of others, San helps to found a city that treats Agni as a religious leader. Agni feeds them his body as food, and before dramatically disappearing, he warms the earth, blowing up a giant eldritch life tree, and San is one of the few survivors. From his perspective, Agni is absolutely a god, disappearing and becoming a mythic figure, saving people he loves and answering his prayers. So, 10 years later, we see San on prosthetic legs, awakening a lightning power unlike anything we've seen. He looks like Luna and the people that populated the Earth, the Ice Witch, like someone who's inherited the final form of these blessings. He's a loud and devout leader, smiting those who would speak against the religion of Agni with his lightning. This village has grown back to its original size with a few dozen villagers. He's starting to go a bit mad with power, and the people under his guidance were going to steal Judah back and recreate the life tree and warm the earth. But San's kind of losing his purpose. They bring Luna to San, and he threatens to burn her for stealing Agni away and stealing his love. She turns his torch into a tree and begins to grow, bringing her memory back of her life before this. He chokes her to stop this. He screams at her. But in the distance, a man on fire approaches. It's not Agni. This man's entirely on fire, his face too. He used to keep himself focused by keeping a little bit of his humanity alive and have part of his face look human. But holding burnt corpses in either hand, he walks towards San in this village, a giant ball of flame. San turns towards him, and lightning kicks him, blasting him across the city, jumping on him and pummeling him with godly blows of lightning. But the fireman keeps getting back up. We see flashes of his humanity. He's driven by Luna. He's driven by life for her, and San, who's taking her away, has awoken the fire punch in him again. Finally, he sticks out his fist at the feet, half dead, of San, and San sets on fire. He's gone too far, and the village sets on fire. Before it can spread, Luna runs up and hugs him, and frees him of the fire again. She tells him, "This time, you become whatever you want. That's my wish." She hands his body to Nanetto, who's approaching from the rubble. And Luna asks Nanetto to take care of him. Even though he's killed so many people, this person has lost his memory now, and he'll be nothing for now. This person will be whatever he wants. She tells Agni to live, and disappears into the branches of a giant tree, stretching up into the sky. We see it fade away, and we're in a cinema again. Luna and Agni are sitting there together, and we're told a story about when they were kids, and how they once imagined a meal they never ate. Convinced they were full, they fell asleep peacefully. The next chapter is the ending. It's 80 years later, and I don't want to talk about it. It feels too special to explain, but we do see the end of Agni's story without his fire. We see Nanetto's movie that she made for Togeda, and what happens to Judah's tree. You'll just have to read it for yourself. So that was Fire Punch by Fujimoto. I think my favorite parts are the beginning and the end. If you couldn't tell, this wasn't a fast read for me. There are a few themes that come full circle, mainly education versus religion, the purpose of life, and the end of the world. I also found it interesting how the religion of Agni was about an actual Fire Punch man, and it was founded after the religion of Behemdorg, which was based on a movie about a fake Fire Punch man, and how Agni was an unwilling actor in his own filmed exploits, and this person was a willing actor in what became the purpose of this world in this timeline. I think I could talk about this all day. It's really stuck with me since I read it originally. Let's just jump into what I liked and disliked before wrapping up this first story from Fujimoto. Some things I liked a lot were the art. It grew on me a lot, the snowy landscapes and loose and expressive character movements. Either Fujimoto's a genius or he's a master at making it look effortless. Either way, he's having a great time and a lot of fun with these characters that he likes a lot. Nothing ever feels stiff. Characters will smile, stick their tongues out, and laugh. And sometimes we see what feels like gigantic double-page spreads with gorgeous snowstorms or explosions. When most of our shots are super tight and focused on one or two characters at a time, these feel like stunning lungfuls of air. And the writing always feels goofy and genuine. Tangents about films he enjoys or characters just laughing at this fucked up world. Oh man, such a good read. I will read anything Fujimoto does from now on. Things I did not like very much. Well, it feels like Fujimoto had some good bullet points from what definitely happened in this world and what needed to happen from point A to point B. We get pretty muddled in between The Ice Witch feels like she only existed to give an exposition dump and set things in motion for the big tree. And then we get a half-ass ending in the middle of the story that killed a bunch of people that got no development, like the Bat Dad and Gynax Gal, and his followers and devotees. And Togeda, man. Togeda was my favorite character, but the trans reveal was half-ass at best, and killing them off was a lazy move that just disappointed me. The whole middle section was just a big negative for me. The lead up to it was awesome, and the ending was fantastic. I won't even spoil it, but come on. This series deserves better. In conclusion, the first work by Fujimoto was really great, especially for such a young author. His work is just exploding with personality and has a knack for writing believable and fun characters. In 90 chapters, it tackled some big themes, maybe too big for its own good. And there's a lot to love here, but I'm just excited to see what's next. Hope you'll join me then when we cover his one-shots and eventually when we cover Chainsaw Man. Thank you again, just goodbye. If you like this, please consider subscribing. Please tune in on my Twitch channel and talk about manga with me. Again, that's v_vlogs. And I look forward to our next part. Thank you. Bye-bye.